Hello and welcome to the Building Foundations podcast. Today I'm joined by Judith, a Chartered Town Planner. Judith, could you introduce yourself, please?
Hi everyone, my name is Judith Onuh. I'm a Principal Planner at WSP in the infrastructure. I've got 7 years experience within planning, working in both the public and private sector.
Fantastic, thank you. Thank you for joining me today as well on this podcast. We got there in the end with a bit of technology issues, didn't we?
Always me and technology. We got there.
Yeah, we got there, no problem at all. I just wanted the way I always start these podcasts is to delve into, so you've explained obviously what you do, but we kind of want to delve into how you came about joining the property and construction industry, kind of what the thought process was behind that, and just how you ended up there really. So how did you end up in the property and construction industry?
So it started at A-level. A lot of people I've spoken to, they were in planning, they always say they fell into planning by accident, but mine wasn't. It was kind of by accident, as in I chose the course. But it was back at A-level and we had a really, really good careers advice service. And I think it was 2 weeks before I needed to submit my UCAS personal statement. I went in there and I literally sat down and said, look, I need you to help me write this. And I remember the careers service person at the time, Alan, his name was, he looked at me, he's like, I'm not going to write it for you, but we can discuss why you feel you can't write it. And that's when it all began, really. He just sat me down and he said, look, going to university, it's a big, you're going to be there 3 to 4 years, depending on what course you pick. You want to make sure you're happy. So this isn't a decision I would rush if I was you. Mm-hmm. And I'm really glad I listened to that, because then I spent another year at college and working part-time and just really delving into what I wanted to do in the future. And he said, we had a long conversation. He said, what do you enjoy outside of college? What do you actually enjoy? What subjects do you enjoy? So I was like really into geography, really liked the human aspect of geography. I did sociology as well, and I really enjoyed that. I said I enjoy looking at buildings. I find buildings interesting, but I know I don't want to do architecture.
Okay.
And he just said to me, have you ever thought about town planning? And I was like, never heard of it. What is it? Yeah. And he said, right, for you to go and research. So I did. I went to some open days at Liverpool University of Liverpool even. I went to UE, which is where I ended up going. And the lecturers, and found out that actually, quite like the sound of that. Ended up applying, and I did a 4-year course at UE, social planning, and that's it really. The rest.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so actually, although you kind of fell into it in terms of the advice you was given, and then you hadn't heard about it and you researched it, it still shows, a great deal of research to begin with to make sure that you chose that, that pathway. Because I think one of the things it talks about on some of the podcast episodes that I've recorded so far is that there actually isn't that much talk about the different options there are within construction and property, is there, right at the early stages. So you were very fortunate in the fact that you knew that you kind of was interested in the industry, and you had somebody there that was able to kind of open that pathway to you.
And I think it's really important that careers advice is brought back into schools. I think, there's so many different options out there. Not everyone wants to go to university. There's apprenticeships, and I think it's really important that young adults are given that advice at that point in time. I don't even know where I'd end up now if I didn't have the careers advice. So I'm always really big on that. Whenever I speak to people, I'm like, is there a careers advisor you can go and speak to? Or, somebody, when I was growing up, there was a lot, I don't know if you remember, there was Connections. That was on the high street, and within my school as well, we had a Connections lady that you could go to, and I don't really see that anymore. I might be out of the loop, but I'm not sure that service exists, and it's such a shame because it was such a good resource. You can go in and they help you with your CV, they point you in the right directions of different websites to look at, and I feel like, you know, obviously the construction industry, like you said, it's such a massive industry with so many different roles, and
Yeah.
people are just, you know, mainly aware of the main ones, the big ones, you know, the engineering, the architectures, building surveyings, but there's such a lot that, you know, young talent can get involved in, and I'm not sure we're capturing that, which is such a shame.
Yeah, definitely. No, I agree. I think it probably depends a lot on where you're based in, you know, in the world or in the UK, and what school you go to as to what actual advice you get given. Because my school, obviously that was in Lincolnshire, where I am, that there wasn't a careers advisor, or not that I recall. And the only exposure I had to the construction industry was thinking about, you know, people that maybe were working in the trade side of things, which wasn't appealing to me at that time. So then I went down a completely different route, and obviously I've ended up in recruitment, but had I known about all these other avenues back then, I wonder whether I would have chosen something different, because actually it's a really great sector and so many opportunities. So yeah, I think
Absolutely.
definitely more needs to be done, doesn't it? Absolutely. We'll touch upon that a bit later as well when we talk about sort of challenges within the industry, because I definitely think that, you know, that's one of the big ones, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah.
Perfect. Okay, so go back to your planning career then. So you finished your studies, and then I guess from there it was then looking for your first opportunity. So how did I mean, first of all, how did it feel going into the world of work from there?
Well, I left uni in 2013. I didn't actually get my first graduate role till 2014.
Okay.
I think I took a year out in a way because I spent the last year studying abroad in France. So by
Yeah.
the time I came back, I'd missed my family, missed my friends, and I just needed a minute to kind of, you know, regroup and rethink. So when I did finally get my first job, I felt ready. I felt, you know, that I could give it everything, energy for it. So that was brilliant.
Yeah.
Um, so I ended up working at the planning inspectorate, and I don't know if you know where the building is, Bristol. It's such a large building. It's got so many floors, and I remember walking in and I was like, oh my gosh, so intimidated. I was so nervous. But I had such a lovely lady looking after me, Kate, and she was like, what have you got to be nervous about? We're all normal in here. Don't worry, you'll be fine. But you know, when you come out of university, everyone's so professional, you know, they know what they're talking about. And there's you sat in a meeting
Yeah.
being like, I don't know what that word is. I don't know what that word is. I'm so lost.
Yeah.
But I was really lucky, you know, I had supportive colleagues who really helped me through the process. And you just build your confidence as you go along. So getting that first job was a bit like, yes, you know, kind of, yeah, you can do it. It's not impossible. And stepping foot into the working environment, I've worked in office environments before, but that's only part-time jobs during uni. This was a completely different ball game, and it was nerve-wracking.
Yeah.
But now I look back, I think that, yeah, I had a great time. I thoroughly enjoyed being there. And so if anyone's looking at any roles, I'd always recommend PINS. It's such a great place to work. So yeah, that was my first role, public sector role, yeah.
Fantastic. And did you, when you were actually applying, I guess, for that role and you secured that role, was there quite a few different things that you were applying for? Was it a long process to actually find that first role, or did you actually pick it up quite quickly?
I think it was a long process. It took about 6 months.
Okay.
And through that process, I went to different interviews, and it was a learning process. So my first application I sent off, I think about it now and I think, oh, you know, I'm really embarrassed, to be honest. It just didn't cut it. And I think that's part of the process, isn't it? Learning how to apply for a job.
Of course it is.
By the time I got to PINS, I'd really refined it. I knew exactly what I needed to say. I knew exactly what they were looking for. And I knew exactly how to draw that out from my previous experience. And also some of the interviews I'd been to, I'd always ask for feedback. The first one, I can't even remember what I said. I was that nervous. I was literally like, oh, you know, deer in the headlights. But by the time I got to PINS, I think I was still nervous, but I just understood what my skills were. and haven't had feedback. They said, oh, we didn't really understand if you do this part of the job. I think for your next time round, you draw that out from, you know, your experience working in customer service, for example. You know, you know how to deal with members of the public, but it's just making sure that you can draw that out. And obviously it's not things I've necessarily thought of before, because you don't really, because you're not applying for those type of roles.
No.
So I think that is part of the journey. So for any grads out there that think, oh, the first one didn't land, I wouldn't get disheartened. We all go through it. It's definitely a process, and the right job will land. So it's, yeah, don't worry.
Definitely. No, that's really good advice. And I think going on what you said there, then asking for that feedback, which, you know, as a recruiter, it's something that we have to kind of draw out of the clients we work with sometimes. And I think whether you're going through an agency looking for a role or whether you're applying directly, actually asking for that feedback is really important, isn't it?
Yeah,
because that's how you learn. That's how you do better. Because otherwise, your application will be the same each time, and you'll get no further forward. Perfect. Exactly. That's really, really good advice. So you joined your first, you joined your first company. You're really pleased by the sounds of things that you joined them. You settled in quite well, and then, I mean, talk us through the process. I mean, from there, obviously, you've become chartered. So when did that come about? Is that something you started with sort of immediately, or was it further down the line?
No, so it's further down the line. So it was in 2018.
Okay.
I got chartered. So it took 3 years, and that was working through different roles. So I went from the public sector into the private sector.
Yeah.
Ended up working for a house builder, and that was really great experience as well. Drawing graduate, because you get to see the whole process from the beginning to, so when you first buy the site to actually houses up and people in there living and, you know, enjoying the houses that's being designed. And so the APC process was really good. I had a really good manager. She was very supportive. She really helped you understand what you were writing. I remember now it was just things about supporting and being an admin. She's like, no, you're a professional. You need to draw that out in there. So that was really good. She was like, no, you are supporting us, but yes, you are making independent decisions by yourself as well. And that's what they're looking for you to demonstrate. So draw that out. But my main advice with the APC is start your logbook early.
Yeah.
Don't leave it to the last minute. Now I look back at my logbook, I think actually some parts was hit and miss, because obviously you're working as well, so sometimes you are busy. So you go back and, you know, try and fill it up for the last couple of months. It's really to think through what you're writing. And now I look back at my submission, I think you do grow. You see, like, your first entry is I sat in a meeting taking notes, and then by the time you get towards the end, I'm looking after this planning application, you know, I'm submitting it, wrote the planning statement, liaising with the case officer. So you do see that gradual growth, and it's really nice to see, because sometimes you just think, oh, I'm not making any progress, or this is, you know, this sometimes in the role where it is challenging, but knowing that you are taking those steps to get in there is really encouraging. That's why I always say the logbook, you should spend time on the logbook. If not for anyone else, it's for yourself really at the end of the day, tracking your progress.
Yeah, definitely. I bet that gives you a lot of confidence, doesn't it, to see how much you've developed and how far you've come, which is really good. Did you move from, so obviously you moved, like you said, from the public sector to private sector. Did you do that on purpose to become chartered, or was it just something that happened? What was that move about?
So it was two things. So the job I had at planning inspector, it was a free contract, so it was 1 year. But it was a great way to get your foot into the door, like the planning world, really. So just to gain that experience. Then when it was coming to an end, I did think, I was like, oh, do I want to stay in the public sector, private sector? Let's just apply. So I applied for different roles, and I ended up going for gaining a role as a planning assistant in a small planning consultancy. Completely moved where I was living and things like that, but it just didn't work out for me. It wasn't the right fit. That's another thing. If I think back, I would have done differently. I would have spent a lot longer looking at the various roles. And as much as you want to get a job early on, you want that experience, it is also for companies to demonstrate that they're the right place for you. So it is a two-way street. If you're being interviewed, you need to interview them as well. Because, you know, there's stories of people going to the wrong place and it, you know, their confidence is being completely shattered, and at that stage in your career, that's not what you need. Obviously you need someone supportive, constructive criticism as well. So it's finding the right balance. I don't know if you found that as a recruiter.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I love what you just said, because it's something that I say to candidates when they go to an interview, is it's a two-way process. It isn't just about whether my client wants to hire you. You've actually got to want to work for them as well. If you don't want to work for them, then it's just not going to work. And don't just take a role just because it's there. You actually need to make sure it's a good move longer term. And yeah, you're right. Like early on in your career as well, it's hugely important, because it can delay becoming chartered. It can delay your progress. It can almost prevent future opportunities as well. So yeah, definitely important. Obviously, you know, you've got to where you want to be now, which is a great story. But no, that's good advice for anyone considering where to go, really. So before we kind of move on to actually becoming chartered, I just wanted to ask another question really about the private and public sector, and for anybody listening, what do you think the main differences were because obviously you've worked for both now, so how would you kind of compare the two environments? And do you think that perhaps certain people at that stage of their career are better suited for one or the other? What would be your thoughts?
I think the main difference between public and private is that in the public sector, you are dealing with the public purse, in effect.
Okay.
So everything that you do, you have to bear that in mind. And I would say you're dealing more with the political aspect of planning. So you work closely with local councillors or MPs, for example. You're much more involved in that world of things. In the private sector, you do obviously come up against challenges dealing with politics, but it's not the same nature. You're not as immersed in it as you would be if you're in the private sector. I think in the public sector, I think there's the main difference in the public sector from my point of view is that I think they're severely under-resourced. I know from my time in PINS, the people who work there worked incredibly hard with very little budget, to be honest. I mean, I was amazed at the amount of work that they churned out. And coming into the private sector, you often get frustrated with things not going through as quickly as possible. And, you know, there's come up in terms of not enough people in local authorities to deal with an application. But having worked on the other side, I think it's helped me understand a little bit that it's not necessarily always the case officer that's the problem. They just don't have the resource to pull through the amount of applications that they're getting. So for me, that's been a good way of balancing and understanding the different challenges that different work environments face. Obviously in the public sector, private, it's a lot more fast-paced. You know, your delivery is important. You have to be able to meet your deadlines, and that's it at the end of the day. So you're used to working at pace. For someone thinking whether public or private sector, I'd say it's down to you and what you want to get out of your career. If you're wanting to really understand planning process and how local plans are formulated and the development management side of planning, looking at applications and seeing does that tally with what we've got in the local plan, is it in accordance with national planning policy, then maybe the public sector is better suited to your needs. If you're looking for a variety of caseload and working on big infrastructure projects, then potentially the private sector's for you. I think it really, really just depends. I know that some private sector companies have fantastic graduate development programs. So I'd say that they should sit down and think about what exactly is it they want to get out of their career, what are they passionate about, and then tailor your job search in line with that. So if you know you like working on big road schemes and highway schemes and, you know, airports, then you might be looking at a multinational company or engineering company with a planning team. So yeah, it just depends.
Yeah, so tailor it. So it kind of comes back to what you're saying as well about making sure the company you join is right. So actually at the early stages, actually start to think about the bigger picture and perhaps where do you want to be and what do you want to have achieved in maybe 5 years' time. Then you can find out public or private, and then from there you can tailor to what company you might want to join. That's really, again, really good advice. Brilliant. Okay, so we'll go back to your APC then. So you went through that process. And I mean, obviously you became chartered. How was it at the end? So on the town planning side, I mean, I obviously speak to a lot of surveyors as well, and they fill their log and then they have their professional interview. So on the town planning side, how was the process for you, and how did you find out whether you passed or not?
There's no interview for town planning. So you've got to fill your form, got your logbook, and you've got to demonstrate professional competence. So you have 3 statements that you need to write. And so you spend quite a lot of time going through that, demonstrating, do you understand the political nature of planning? If you encountered any ethical challenges during your career, if so, what are they, and demonstrate that. How did you overcome that? What did you learn? Because obviously as planners we need to abide by the MRTPI professional code of conduct. So it's demonstrating that you understand that in your role, and your professional experience statement just outlines the different case studies that you've worked on during your time as a graduate and prior to becoming chartered, and what was your role in those case studies. So were you directly responsible for stakeholder management? Were you directly responsible for drafting all the planning application documents? So it sounds easy, but it's really difficult as well, because I think you've got 2,000 words to work with. Trying to fit, I don't know, 24 months or longer into, it's quite challenging. So you've got, again, that's where your logbook comes in, because it helps you draw out the different skills that you've demonstrated on different projects all the way through. So that really helped me kind of organise my thoughts and put that into a statement. But I would really suggest it's really important to have people read it for you, because by the time you've read it, like, 20 times, you can't read anything anymore. So that was really good.
Oh,
that's where my manager came in. Yeah, she was really good. And then you get a letter through the post, just letting whether or not you've passed.
How long did that take?
I think it was 3 months from submission.
Oh, quite a long wait then.
So I think and I didn't pass the first time. So that was disappointing, but when I look back, I understood why. Because as part of that, you also need to outline a professional development plan. And whilst you're applying to get chartered, part of that is you need to maintain your professional development. And so you really need to outline what you're going to do going forward to make sure that you're up to date, in terms of your CPD and other other opportunities to develop your strengths and weaknesses. So I failed on that. So I had to go back, sit down and really think about it, really be critical and really outline where I wanted my career to go. And in a
Okay.
way that has helped me,
Yeah.
just to make some of the career choices that I have made since then. And then you get your certificate in the post, which was lovely to receive. So that, yeah, it's a really, really lovely moment when you get that, because obviously it's just a confirmation of all your hard work being, worthwhile.
Yeah.
So you get it in the post and with your name on it and MRTPI.
Fantastic.
Fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. So if we go back to, obviously you said you didn't pass first time, and I'm sure there's many people that go through that as well, and it's sort of part of the process. It's the same in surveying. Lots of people don't kind of hit it first time. So they told you where you needed to improve, so you got some feedback, so that's fantastic. What advice would you give, because it's very commendable that you push past that, you didn't become too disheartened, you did what you needed to do, and you went out and you got it and you achieved it. Some people might get extremely disheartened by not passing first time. What advice would you give them, having gone through that yourself?
I'd say don't get disheartened. If you're going to be in planning, you need to be resilient. There's a lot that changes at a drop of a hat. When you're dealing on a project, it can go from being brilliant to something out of the blue coming and throwing a spanner into the works. So I think it's an opportunity to develop that. And at the end of the day, not everyone passes first time. You could have passed your driving test first time and someone sat next to you, it could have been their third or fourth time. The important thing is not to give up, just to keep going. If you want to be chartered, that's the process. And if you don't get it the first time and you're given feedback, then work on that feedback and submit it and demonstrate that you are able to do what it is they said they couldn't find originally in your application. And that's the way to look at it. I think if it's something you really want, then you just put your mind to it and go for it.
Definitely. Yeah, you're right. Like you said, with driving tests, with lots of things in life, you don't pass first time. It doesn't mean that when you get to that end goal, you're any less capable than somebody who passed first time. It doesn't. The end goal is, the goal is just that you get there, however that route is, and it actually shows a lot of resilience to keep going. How long did you have to wait between sort of submitting again? Was it quite a quick process, or do you remember?
I think it was the same amount of time. I found out actually when I was, the letter got sent home and I was at a friend's wedding, and my sister said, I think there's something here that you're going to want to know about. And I was like, it didn't even cross my mind. I was like, what is it? And she had picture of the letter, and I was like, oh, go on, open it for me. So she opened it and she's like, yeah, you've done it. That was really nice. That was really nice. But I think it's the same amount. I think it's about 3 months, because I think we do it as the same time as everybody else who's applied. So they give you different cut-off dates, and then you'll find out the same weekend. Basically, they send out the letters on the same day, and whoever gets the letters first finds out first. So
Brilliant.
it's a really, really lovely feeling.
I bet you had extra celebrations that day then.
Really enjoyed the wedding. My friends, they were there. They heard it all. They were excited as well. They're like, "Yay, well done!" So it was lovely.
That's amazing. Pleased that you obviously got there and didn't become disheartened. And now your career, it's kind of your oyster, isn't it? You can go where you want to go now with it. For anybody, so now you've become chartered, so obviously your role is now different to when you first started. Your responsibilities are obviously going to be different. For anybody that maybe is listening and is actually even at kind of the undergrad stage, or is even just thinking about university or town planning as a career option, just briefly describe what your day-to-day role is, how you describe the role and the sort of thing they'd be doing.
I think because it differs so much from day to day. But if I talk about my role now, working on nationally significant infrastructure projects. So you could be on that project for 3 to 4 years before it even goes into planning. before planning application is even submitted.
Yeah.
So it just depends where in that time frame you fall. But let's say you've been on it since the beginning, then your job is to assist in the planning strategy for the scheme. So if a project comes in, you'd look at it and you determine, is it best to get this consent under the Town and Country Planning Act, or is it better to go under the Development Consent Order, which is the 2008 Planning Act?
Okay.
So that's, the first thing you'd be doing when looking at that. So after you've decided the strategy of which regime is best for you to go down, you would then start to work up in as part of a wider team. So you'd have your ecologist, you'd have your landscape architect, you'd have your flood risk drainage specialist, your highway specialist, just a full project team for whatever that requires. You'd start working up the evidence base. So, if you need an environmental statement, that will start being worked up. The details of the development will be worked up. You start going out for consultation, speaking to local authorities, members of the public. So there's a lot of coordination and project management involved. There's a lot of communication, not only with your project team, your client, and members of the stakeholders. And when you get to the application being submitted, that could have been, 2 to 3, 4 years even, just depending on the nature of it. The development you're working on. And then it's submitted to PINS for examination. And at that point, it's kind of out of your hands a little bit, because now the planning inspectorate, they drive the programme. So they will issue a rule letter which outlines all the different deadlines you need to meet as the project is being examined, and they can be quite tight. Sometimes, 2 weeks turnaround. You might think that's a long time, but when you're dealing with, thousands and thousands of pages, 2 weeks is a lot of time. You've got people commenting left, right, and centre. You've got members of the public commenting. You've got local authorities commenting. You've got different national bodies, like Historic England, for example, commenting, or the Environment Agency, and you've got to respond to each one of those comments on behalf of your client. So it's a really intense period, and the examination lasts for 6 months.
Okay.
After those 6 months, the examination closes, and then you've got the inspectorate or the inspectors considering all the information that's been put before them to issue a recommendation to the Secretary of State, whichever one it might be. It might be the Secretary of State of Transport, for example, if you've been looking at a transport scheme. And within those 3 months, they could either say, yes, we've examined this project. These are the main key issues. This is how it's been demonstrated, it's been addressed or not addressed, and therefore we recommend it for approval, or we don't. Once that's been submitted to the Secretary of State, they then have another 3 months to consider that recommendation.
Okay.
And they will come out with either yes or no, basically. So, Secretary of Transport can say, yes, we're happy with this, or no, we don't think it should be granted a development consent order. So, quite a long process. But considering the scheme, it's a long process, yes, but considering the scale of development, it's not, the actual examination of it is very quick. Whereas, for example, if you're maybe going through a local authority, it could take time. So, it's intense. There's a lot to do, but it's just, being a good team player, being able to communicate well with your team, your clients, with stakeholders, being able to, retain a lot of information, but also put that out in plain English as well, not using too many technical terms so people understand what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Because even as a planner, sometimes someone will speak to you in technical language and you'll be a bit like, I can just about follow what you've said.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's being able to digest that information and then put it back out in, in a way that the audience that you're speaking to will be able to understand.
Perfect. No, that's a good overview, definitely. So I think you kind of touched upon some of the key attributes that somebody going into this should probably have, or certainly want to develop on. I think obviously we talked about resilience, which was with the APC, but also with the whole process in itself. Then you talked about teamwork there, didn't you? And communication. Yeah. Is there any others you'd add, or do you think they're sort of the three main ones?
Those are the three main ones, as when you're starting out in your career. But obviously as you gain experience, your technical knowledge becomes better. Yeah. You understand how things work together. You understand what could potentially be a risk. And these aren't things you're going to be able to do straight out of university. I know I couldn't, no. And even now, there's still things I still don't consider to be a risk, but obviously people with more experience in the industry than me are able to say, oh, actually, Judith, if you considered X, Y, and Z, yeah. Oh, no, I haven't. Like, oh, you might want to because, of X, Y, and Z. So you're always learning throughout this process. Yeah. No one knows it all. And I think that's why I really enjoy working with the team that I am at the moment, because everyone's just so helpful and, they really support you and you support them through it. It really is a team effort.
That's really good. So openness to learn then in a bit of a summary would be absolutely essential.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah. Okay. So in terms of you then and what you're doing, so obviously you've got, your day-to-day role. Are you getting involved in anything else in the industry at the moment, or do you plan to in the future?
So I'm involved with the BAME Planners Network. Okay. I sit on the steering group for that. And that network was founded last year in August, so it hasn't been around for very long, but it's been such a brilliant network. The founder, Helen MRTPI, she's a chartered town planner. She's got over 25 years or more experience in the industry, and it's been a fantastic network to be part of, just to promote diversity within the industry.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important. And I think that's why I was so keen to get involved, because, like I said earlier, I think it's such a shame that it's not a profession that's normally spoken about as much as you would architecture or building surveying, for example. And I think it's such a brilliant profession. There's so many different routes within planning that anyone can go down. Yeah. And I think it's really important to bring diversity into this profession. Not just, women, people from BAME backgrounds, people from different social classes, people from different parts of the country even. Yeah. Just add so much to the profession. And when we're building places for people and we're coming up with policies that affect people in their day-to-day lives, it's really important that you've got people in those positions understand the communities that they're there to serve. Yeah. And that's why, for me, diversity is really important, because at the end of the day, planning is people-centred. I know a lot of people think it's always about, housing delivery and housing, putting up tall buildings. That is an element of it. But at the end of the day, you are creating a space for people. Yes. So people need to always be at the centre of your decisions and policy formulations. So if you've got a wide range of thought, a wide range of experience in the room, then you're more likely to come up with better policies and better plans for people.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, yeah, I agree. And it's something that's been discussed pretty much in every single episode of this podcast so far, is diversity and inclusion. And it's something as recruiters, we see as well needs to improve. And that's kind of one of the reasons as well for this podcast, was to shed some light on that, to attract more people into the industry. But what do you think obviously that's something that you're really kind of key on, especially now that you've joined the organisation. So what do you think are the key things that we could do, or that we should be doing better to help with that?
I think starting again with the careers advice,
Yeah.
I think that definitely needs to be worked upon. I think more investment is required, because a wide range of schools don't have that service.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's really important that that's spread out and rolled out nationally.
Yeah.
Every school, or and college, sixth form, that there's someone there who, even if it's one person, for 2 to 3 schools, there's that resource. I think within the industry at the moment, there could be more routes to the industry. So I'm really pleased to see the apprenticeship schemes coming through as well. That's really important, because not everyone wants to go to university, and that
No.
you need to be able to accommodate those people. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm really pleased to see that coming through. Mentoring for professionals within the industry, that's really
Mm-hmm.
important. Being able to identify talent early on and
Yeah.
develop talent, and recognise the barriers sometimes that's in place, and working to remove some of those barriers, and actually monitoring what the recruitment process is like in your firm, or industry, or are we getting people applying from a wide range, or are we not? If not, why not?
Yeah.
And I know some of these questions are often sometimes difficult to answer, but if we want to improve and we want to encourage diversity, then at times there are going to be some difficult questions, somewhat potentially uncomfortable for some people, that need to be answered.
Yeah, definitely. Because I think there is that worry when talking about diversity and inclusion, isn't there? Because it's almost like people don't want to say the wrong thing, or do the wrong thing, but you've got to talk about it. And you're right. If there's things that you can do within a process that would help help this potential advert perhaps go out to more people and different groups of people, then you've got to do it. So yeah, asking those difficult questions. Definitely. It's just getting people to do that, isn't it? And come out their comfort zone.
It can be quite daunting, because, sometimes people feel a bit immediately on the defensive side.
Yeah.
And it's not about that. It's like, nobody's getting it right.
No.
You're not the only company, or, you're not the only recruitment firm, or nobody's getting it right. But there are some things out there that people are doing that are improving the situation. So we can look at that, and what can we learn from that? It might
Definitely.
not be that all their solutions fit our company, but maybe we can take 2 or 3 things and work on it and develop it into something that works for us. It's just taking that first baby step, I think.
It is, yeah. And just thinking, okay, you might not be doing it right at the moment, or quite right at the moment, but it doesn't mean that everyone's frowning upon you thinking you're doing that intentionally. You just don't know how to do it right yet.
Yeah.
So yeah,
exactly.
I agree with that. And then also, like you said, going back to that early piece, which again we touched upon at the start, didn't we? Bringing more people into the industry in the first place, is naturally bringing more people in the industry in the first place is naturally going to increase the number of people we have throughout the industry that touch on all those different groups and open it up. And I think, again, apprenticeships, like you said, perfect. One of the good things that's happening within like the world of surveying is that there's organisations starting now that actually bring people into the industry who perhaps have already gone down a different career path and actually want to cross back over. So an example within residential surveying would be Zava, who take people from any background. It can be completely not property related, and they'll actually put you through the training to become a residential surveyor and begin the process to become chartered as well.
That's amazing.
Yes, I think things like that are great. And I mean, I found out about that, it was probably a good few years ago now, and they're growing and growing. And I think one of the things that always comes to my mind is that there needs to be more of that happening, but in all the other different areas of property and construction. It's just a long process, and it'll take that would be, I think that would be a good idea, wouldn't it, to that would bring people in from all different backgrounds.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, with the current climate, there's people looking at potentially, you know, career changes, and you know, why not plan it?
Yeah,
you know, it's a great career, and you could have had a career, I don't know, in finance, for example, and that there's many transferable skills into the planning sector. You could look at the economies of a scheme and whether the figures all stack up, you know. So
absolutely.
Or securing, you know, infrastructure contributions on behalf of a local authority. There's so much you could do.
Yeah.
And that's a fantastic scheme. Definitely.
Absolutely. No, I agree. And hopefully, as time goes on, you know, particularly obviously with the organisation you're involved in, and there's lots of different kind of groups, isn't there, out there, and people supporting different areas of diversity and inclusion. And hopefully, between all those great movements that are being made, things like that will become more prevalent, I guess, in the different disciplines.
Absolutely. I think there is a move towards that in the industry, and I think a lot more of it. There's a lot of mentoring schemes going on at the moment within the industry from different sectors. So I think now that the box of diversity and inclusion has been open full, and you've got a lot more people being open and talking about it, you know, and you see, you know, a lot more companies being proactive about it. You know, my hope is that this will continue, and we'll be seeing a lot more different initiatives across the industry promoting diversity and inclusion.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's good that people are starting to have these difficult conversations. And I think that diversity and inclusion piece, and then the mental health piece, and, you know, mental well-being of staff and people within the industry, those are two difficult conversations that are starting to be happened. So hopefully the future is bright for that, and steps will be made. What do you think?
Absolutely. Yeah.
One of the other kind of questions that I ask, and obviously challenges within the industry, we've touched upon, you know, actually getting people into the industry, diversity, inclusion. Is there any other kind of challenges you foresee, particularly maybe even in town planning, that kind of the sector's got to overcome, or anything that might come up in the future, do you think?
I think there's a lot that we as planning can do. I think there's some social issues within our communities that have been highlighted, especially over the last year, that I know that planning can play an active role in, you know, addressing. So, you know, you've got an ageing population. How do we ensure that our communities, you know, are suitable and support the ageing population, that our housing that we're building is able to be, you know, adapted for people to stay in from birth all the way through to, you know, old age, for example, or, you know, the housing crisis, building houses, but we need to make sure that these houses are affordable for the communities in which they're being built. You've got climate change. You know, a lot of companies are working on net zero carbon initiatives, and how to that into our buildings, our day-to-day life, our fabric, our environmental fabric. So there's a lot of work that planners have to do, and other built environment professionals. At the end of the day, we all bring these communities and projects to life. So there's a lot for us to do.
Much.
But but you know, technology is definitely playing a part in that, and making it more accessible to get involved and, you know, planned and proposed for their communities. So I think as long as all built environment professionals continue to work together, I think we'll be able to not necessarily resolve all of the issues, but make good headway within the next couple of years. Absolutely.
Brilliant. So it's going to be about collaboration then, really, moving forwards. There's some questions kind of just come to mind that actually you'd probably be a good person to ask this, and I didn't prepare you for this question, so sorry, but I was just thinking about, because you're obviously talking about different populations and different areas and things. Obviously, if we look at kind of town centres and things, so with the retail side of things, that's a lot that's going online, as we all know, and there's so many shops closing. What do you think the future of like town centres is going to look like? What's your thoughts on that?
I think they're going to move towards being leisure based.
Yeah.
So more of a destination for going for something to eat, socializing.
Yeah.
Potentially being event centres, or like if you've got a really nice open space, that could be a destination where people go for a music event, or a cultural festival or something. I don't think retail will move away completely.
No.
I think you will still get people wanting to go into specialist shops.
Yeah.
So I think there will be an element of that remains on the high street, but I think the big brands and things like that, I think potentially you'd see them online, but small independent specialist niche stores will still remain in the city centre.
Okay.
So I think,
I think
give another couple of years, let's see what happens.
Definitely, it's always evolving, isn't it? But I think I'm with you. I don't think it'd be the end of the high street, but it'll be the end of it kind of as we know it. Definitely. And I can see some of those changes happening already. Like, I know obviously time's difficult and we can't really go anywhere at the moment, but there's so many new like restaurants, for example, opening up near me and that are going to be open, and that's kind of indicating, I think, where it's going to go, isn't it? Like, just like you said, which is good to hear.
But even in that, I think we still need to balance it out. We can't just have all restaurants in the city centre,
No.
So that'll be a bit much. So I think again there's a balance again that's required there. Just looking at the different uses and what people actually want. Do they want all restaurants in the city centre? Probably not. I think
No.
variety that's needed. So again, that's planners at local authority, looking at that and the different uses, just to make something that's usable and feels like the person who lives there, they feel like this is my city centre, and they can identify with their locality. I think that's really important.
Definitely. I was because where I live has just been awarded like a grant for regeneration, and there's loads of different things they're doing in all the different sectors, but one of the things that there's actually two things that kind of stood out to me, and one of them was the fact that they're trying to incorporate somewhere for people to go and talk about mental health, which is key. I think that should be something that's kind of everywhere, hugely important. And then the other thing was, I don't know if you've seen much of this, but it was actually about a store that was going to be, it was like a supermarket basically, but it was going to be food that was either kind of reduced or lower cost. So it's going to be a more affordable supermarket for people who, perhaps couldn't afford or were trying to, budget on money, especially due to COVID, which obviously has affected everybody. I thought that was a really good idea. Have you seen much of that anywhere else? Oh, sorry, it cut out.
Not that I personally come across. I remember TV, but I can't remember where it was. I think it was somewhere up north that there was a few of these supermarkets springing up, but and I think basically they'd get food that was within like 2 to 3 weeks left of their shelf life. Then in order for it to reduce food waste, which is another big problem,
definitely,
it would be sold in those supermarkets at a discounted price, or or they were giving it to local homeless shelters, things like that, which I think again is important, but not necessarily addressing the real root of the problem. Why are people that that's the question that needs answering.
That's true.
Whilst these initiatives are great, the root of the problem, I feel, isn't being addressed. There's a lot of band-aids being placed on it, but I think we need to get to the root of it and deal with.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think locally it was part of a process of, I think it was the initial step, which, like you said, is a bit like a band-aid, to try and help people out. But their longer term plan was to actually get to the root cause and create more opportunities and improve the economy in the area, and etc. So, sorry, I went a bit off tangent, didn't prepare you for that, but I just thought it'd be interesting to discuss with you. So thank you for that. I guess obviously kind of coming to an end now. We've kind of covered all the key points that I usually cover. So probably just finish off really with what does the future look like for you? Have you got any plans with the stuff that you're involved in, the work that you're doing?
What does the future look like for me? Very bright, I hope.
Yeah.
For me, I'm really interested in social issues and how planning can address that. You probably got that from what I've been talking about today. I think the last year has definitely highlighted to me that there's a lot of work to do, and can I be part of that in fostering that change? I definitely is an underutilized tool. I think it's often forgotten about, and when people are thinking about policy and how to enact change. I think, if there's anything I can do, it would be to keep central government that in the recovery from COVID, and we're not just here to build infrastructure and housing, although they're really important aspects, obviously, of our communities. Also can help to address, like you said, mental health within communities through designing places that allow people with one another, in addressing, the Asian population, in addressing housing inequality, so I think it's just really reiterating and helping to get that agenda, really. That's something I'd love to be involved in.
Perfect. Thank you for sharing that. It's been evident kind of throughout the conversation about the things that you're passionate about, not just within your day-to-day role, but the wider, universe really, and also how you can make a difference. That's really refreshing to hear. So thank you. We'll bring it to an end, but thank you so much for your time today. And I'm really sure people are going to learn a lot from you, and hopefully it will help some people come into the profession as well. So thank you.
No worries. Thank you for having me.
No,
thank you.
You're welcome.